So let's dive straight into the controversy that was recently sparked, that sparked a national conversation about the remarks that were made by podcaster MacGyver, MacG, Mukwevho, which have reignited the questions about digital accountability, ethical boundaries, and the responsibilities that come with unregulated online content. As we navigate this complex issue, we will explore the tension between freedom of expression and responsible communication in the digital realm. So let's welcome the Executive Director of the Press Council of South Africa, Phathiswa Magopeni, as well as journalist, communicator par excellence, that is Oupa Segalwe, both joining me in studio. Thank you. And Oupa, part of the reason we invited you is that piece that you wrote that was published a few days ago in light of the debate about whether or not podcasts should be regulated the same way that broadcasters are regulated. To regulate or not to regulate?
Well, my view is that we need to regulate podcasters or podcasts. And when you mention the word regulate, people get unsettled with reason, of course. But the kind of regulation that one is advocating for looks nothing like the Media Appeals Tribunal that was suggested some 15 years ago, where the state was going to get involved. And one is advocating for what we call self-regulation, where the podcasters themselves could come together and establish a body similar to what we have in broadcasting, like the National Association of Broadcasters, which then is a voluntary organization, and then they draw up a code of conduct by which all their members should abide. And then that body goes further to establish what we know as the BCCSA, the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa, which is essentially a watchdog which upholds freedom of expression, but it counterbalances that with accountability, so that in the event one of the members of the NAB has conducted themselves in such a way that they have fallen foul of the code of conduct, they should be able to be held to account. And there should be consequence management there, but there should be something that looks like justice for the person that was aggrieved by whatever was said.
Phathiswa, your take? Is it desirable to regulate something that people have seen as freedom of expression extending beyond, if I can use the phrase, big media, and just opening it up to everyone else? Is it desirable to have some kind of regulation, and what does that look like for you?
I think for me, I think we're asking a wrong question. Because if we frame the regulation or oversight around podcasts, what happens tomorrow when it's not podcast is something new? Are we going to set up all these small things around the ecosystem? So my view is that, firstly, the kind of regulation that we have, even with mainstream media, is archaic. It's due for reforms.
Sure.
The first thing that you need to do is to look at why podcasters exist in the first place, as with other media. The information ecosystem needs to be protected in the sense that you don't go with what we have currently, which is route to market, being the different mechanisms, your podcast, your radio, your television, but look at the go-to market, which is the proposition being content. We need to regulate content and not platforms. For instance, if you were to change the current system, you would look at news and information content being regulated by one body under a different code of ethics. And then you have a second one being entertainment content being regulated by the second body with its own sets of values, because the values that are embedded in these two ecosystems are different. That's basically what you need. Whether it's going to be on radio, TV, it should be across platforms, news across mechanisms. The same with entertainment, so that you don't find yourselves having been confined to different things when tomorrow there's going to be something else.
Because you don't know what the next technology will be and what challenges it will bring.
Precisely. But as far as freedom of expression is concerned, and what people usually cite as their right to say whatever they need to say, similarly to your mainstream media, whether it's print or radio or digital platforms, all rights come with responsibilities, which is why with the Press Council, you have the Fair Campaign in addition to the Code of Ethics, which is how we operationalize the Code of Ethics. With the Fair Campaign, you need to be factual, you need to be accountable for the content that you produce, you need to be independent, not be driven by commercial interests in the content that we produce. Whether it's, in fact, we tend to think that it's political, commercial, actually religious interests and everything else that could influence the decisions that you make around your content. But you need to be responsible, which is the R in the fair. So everybody needs to adhere to that. But then if you're going to have your entertainment system or content ecosystem, it means that your values have to talk to what is entertainment, whereas your news content and information that assists public to make decisions has to be built around different set of values.
I think that makes a lot of sense. To what extent is the code that you have and the Fair Campaign and other mechanisms that you have cater for the situation as it is now, as opposed to the ideal situation you described? So, for example, online publications that are cropping up from time to time, being started up, are you able to bring them under the ambit and within that area of regulation at the moment?
Ideally, you would want that kind of arrangement, because we should all work towards maintaining the integrity of the information ecosystem in its entirety. But the problem that we have with the two bodies that exist, your Business SA and the Press Council, these are voluntary bodies, both of them. They're voluntary bodies, and they're Business SA is a self-regulatory mechanism by broadcasters. The Press Council is a core-regulatory mechanism because it has public representatives in it that represent the interests of the public in the decision-making or adjudication processes. So that's a slight difference between the two, but it's a big difference because the public has a voice in how the Press Council adjudicates its work. So the fact that these are voluntary mechanisms is a problem in itself, because no one has obligation to join the two bodies, but it's important that you do, because when things happen, like in some cases, one person is going to decide that they want to lodge a complaint against you, and the Press Council has no say because you're not a member. That person can easily take you to court. It's going to cost you, whereas the other mechanisms do not require you to pay anything to have your complaints against you adjudicated. So it's a mechanism that assists the public and that also works in favor of the media entities or the members of the Press Council.
Oupa, why are we even talking about regulation? And I think you addressed this question in your article that you wrote, in your opinion piece. Why can't people who are offended, whose rights are impacted by what is said in podcasts, for example, the likes of Mini Dlamini and the likes, why don't they resort to going to court as opposed to seeking now to regulate podcasts?
It's extremely unfair to expect such people to go to court because, one, courts are very sophisticated. It's a very sophisticated system that is to some extent exclusive in a sense that you need to have deep pockets to be able to mount a case in the High Court, for instance. And a person who is aggrieved in this sense might not have those resources. So I think it is extremely important to have alternative avenues that can be used to achieve the same thing without necessarily having to pay anything. And such mechanisms, they must approach these kind of issues in a very fair and independent way, just like courts. But the difference with them is that they are a quick solution as opposed to the courts, because the courts can take a very long time and all of that. But when you have a mechanism such as an ombud, it provides a very quick solution and you arrive at a fair and just outcome without having to be burdened with money issues and all of that. So I think people should have a choice. Of course, those who have the monies are welcome to sue. But if that is the only avenue available, we exclude others, and that could create problems for the industry.
Phathiswa, I want you to weigh in on this as well, because invariably this is the counter argument that says, here we go again. And I think you address it directly, that you guys just don't want to see a black person thriving. And this is why. Big media, white monopoly, capital-controlled media, and now we have a voice, and now you want to clamp it down.
I don't think we apply ourselves enough if we were to take a view that we were podcasters in terms of the work that we do and the impact that it has on people. To start with, human rights apply to digital platforms and conduct on digital platforms.
Yeah.
Human rights are digital rights are human rights. So there's no way that what you can't do or you won't do publicly, all of a sudden you find space that you think that on social media you can do that. And we know how algorithms reward sensational content, but you cannot profit on erosion of other people, on the erosion of other people's dignity. You cannot do that. So which is why it's important that conduct online must be regulated. I fully agree with Oupa with what I'm very uncomfortable with the use of the word regulated, because it does feel like it has connotations of control, which is not necessarily, it's oversight and ensuring that the media is accountable regardless of platforms. So there is a need to ensure that conduct on digital media is monitored. I don't even want to say monitored, but people conduct them in themselves in a way that does not erode other people's dignity.
How important would it be then to include these voices, the content creators online, in this conversation, such that there's an appreciation that what is being argued for is not a clamping down, but rather conduct that is that rises to the standards of our society in terms of the values that we hold dear in our society. Oupa?
It's extremely important to hear their voices. When we talk regulation, it's like you are creating a mechanism for accountability. And to the extent that whatever code of conduct we come up with will be applicable to those people, it is important for them to participate in the process of establishing those regulations. But fortunately, in our case, in the case of podcasts, a lot of people who are involved in podcasts come from radio. You can talk DJ Spoo, DJ Fresh, MacG, David Mashabela. All of them come from radio, so they are familiar with the do's and don'ts of broadcasting. And one of the things I've suggested is that we may not need a new regulatory body. You could just extend the jurisdiction of the BCCSA to cover that, which means there would have to be part of the NAB, because the NAB is not just a home for commercial, public and community broadcasters. It also has associate members, which could be
because
anyone.
as the code stands right now, when I saw it, it excludes specifically social media and user-generated content.
Exactly, but they do have a way of including people who are not necessarily broadcasters, like your Centec, for instance, is a member of the NAB. But here's the catch. To be a member of the NAB, you have to be licensed, which is where ICASA comes in now. And those are some of the issues that could be discussed as we map our way forward.
That would be a problem, wouldn't it? Needing licensing, would it not be problematic?
Actually, the Press Council regulates content online.
Yes.
So they could easily become part of the Press Council by virtue of them producing and publishing original content online. Because those who would go to the BCCA are those that produce content that goes via radio, TV, and then online.
Sure.
So there's content that goes originally to online platforms would be regulated by Press Council if there was to be that arrangement. But here's one danger that podcasters may not consider by not wanting to be members of any of the bodies that exist. There is a statutory mechanism, which is the complaints mechanism, which is an ICASA mechanism. So you could easily find yourself in that space. You are not regulated, you don't belong to the BCCA, you don't belong to the Press Council. A member of the public or anyone who feels offended by your content could easily take you there, and that's a statutory mechanism.
Yeah. Just as a parting shot, though, I want to be clear. None of you is advocating for there are too many podcasts, which is a cry that you hear every day. Everyone has got a new podcast. When will it all end? It's not what you are advocating for, is it?
Not at all. Media diversity is extremely important. It gives voices to various people who may not have the opportunity to be here, for instance, to express their views. So diversity is important, but there needs to be a way of keeping those who conduct this kind of business in check, so that no one's rights are violated.
Last word to you,
In fact, it was interesting to listen to a Nigerian podcaster who was in Brussels for the World Press Freedom Day saying, actually, the work they do amplifies the work of journalists.
Yeah.
So we need each other, but we need to do things right.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's Phathiswa Magopeni there, who is Executive Director of the Press Council of South Africa, as well as Oupa Segalwe, who is a trained journalist and a seasoned communicator.